I'm just going to continue with Psalm 23 this morning, and we're going to look at a different verse. But before I do that, I just want to ask a question to you that are sitting here, and maybe some of you who are watching me in the classroom. How many of you think you have some enemies? You have enemies? Okay. You have. So when I ask you about the enemies, most probably you're thinking of people, right? People that don't like you, people that you think are against you, people that always pull you down, people that discourage you, and they are almost like enemies. I counsel a lot of young people, and many of these young people's parents are their enemies. They say, I don't like my mom and dad. I don't like my parents. They are my enemies. They don't let me do what I want to do. And it seems that they are enemies. The Psalm 23 this morning, it tells us about enemies, and it tells us what God will do in that particular situation. So in verse 5 in Psalm 23, in the first part, it says, you, that is God, prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You know, we read this psalm many times, and you may have heard it being recited assembly, in the classroom, in value education, and all those places many times. But if you can halt and read this verse, it makes such a lot of sense. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Means to say that God is not leaving you when you are facing your enemies. Now these enemies are, like I said, are not just human. Sometimes enemies are spiritual. Sometimes enemies are things that are not seen. The Bible says that we fight a battle not in our flesh, not in the blood. It's not against people. It's against principalities and powers of darkness. So in the darkness, in that realm, the spiritual realm, there are forces that are coming against you. So for example, I can take my example, and I can say that if I work through the whole day, I will be very energized, I will not yawn, I will not be sleepy. But the moment in the night, after I've had dinner and have, sitting, reading the Bible, 5 minutes into the reading, I'll start yawning. I'll feel sleepy. And it seems that everything is getting designed for me to stay away from this word. When I start to pray, I will feel tired. I have to overcome it every single time. It seems that something is against us, which is not people, obviously. So the Bible is telling us that in the presence of these enemies, seen and unseen, God prepares a table for us. This table is not just one single table. There are things on that table. And this table over here means that it is filled with food. In fact, there is a Swedish word. I do not know if you have heard this Swedish word. It's used particularly for a table filled with food, many different kinds of food, and the word is smorgasbord. And that word smorgasbord means there is all kinds of food on the table. And you can go pick and eat anything that you want to, like a buffet. The Bible is telling us this morning that in the presence of your enemies, when things seem absolutely unlikely that you will win in that situation, if you trust in God, then He will prepare a table before you, and you can go pick and choose from God anything that you want to. This morning my devotion that I was spending time with was in 1 Kings chapter 19 in the Old Testament. There's a story about this man called Elijah. In chapter 18, Elijah does big miracles, amazing miracles. God comes through in the big things. There are thousands of people gathered, and they see fire fall from heaven and consume a sacrifice. In chapter 19, the exact opposite happens. There is a woman, she's evil, she's possessed by demons, and she proclaims that I will have you killed, Elijah. And so this man who called on God in the previous chapter starts to run away. He flees, he just wants to escape. And for 40 days and 40 nights he just keeps running. But the Bible tells us that in that time of running, God provides food for him. At one time he was sleeping under a broom tree, and he had fallen off to sleep. And then when he got up, he saw in front of him a cake, a bread, a piece of bread that was baked on coal, which means somebody has baked that food and brought it to him, and a jar of water. In that seemingly, in the midst of all that trouble, Elijah found God providing food for him. This morning, I want to encourage you that maybe you feel that there is adversity from people that are against you, from situations that you have not control over, things that are spinning out of control. The Bible is telling us this morning that God, prepares a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Presence of our enemies means in the worst possible situation. When I picturize it, it's like a comedy movie. You know, you're sitting on a big open space. There is an army opposite you, the enemy, and you're sitting on a chair, and the table is laid before you, and you're eating food. It's a comic picture, but it's a picture that God gives to us because He puts us in comfort. And that, if you can imagine that picture, that you're sitting there relaxed and there is no tension, it also tells us that we can be so secure in God, even when everything around us is opposite. So this morning, I pray and I hope that even in your worst situations, you might have seen God work in a very big way. Maybe some of you prayed when you had a fever or something and you got well. Maybe the next day immediately, or something, some miracle happened, or you heard of a miracle. But now you are in this place where nothing is working. You're running for 40 days and 40 nights, and it seems that God is not even close. But be encouraged this morning, because He prepares a table before us in the presence of all that is against us, if we put